Welcome to the Agile Wire. Brought to you by Wisconsin Agility. We want you to get agile and stay agile. Now here are your hosts, Jeff Bubolz and Chad Beier. And we're recording. All right, kick us off, Jeff.
All right, we got Fredrik and Paul, and we're talking all product today in this podcast. So I'm going to kick it over to you guys. You guys are both professional Scrum trainers like Chad and I, and we met in the Netherlands, and we had some great conversations about some of the problems in the product space today. So I don't know, I'll kick it both to you. You've been working on some new courseware. You've been working on a lot of stuff in this space recently. So like, if you could sum it up to our listeners, like what is the problem that we're facing today?
No. So it started, us working on this stuff started about 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, I think. When we met during the annual Scrum.org face-to-face, and we were like, hey, there's something missing here. There's something missing. So our experience is really that these product owners are way too much stuck in delivery land. Yeah, so they're just cranking out features. They're not really owning anything because, so they're owning the implementation of solutions. And I think Fredrik and I are both really convinced about, hey, if there's a key to becoming more agile, if there's a key to allow that whole Scrum thing to take the next step and become more useful, then that's where it's at, you know, and a big part of that is, hey, can we get the outcome and the impact that you're actually trying to achieve with what it is you're doing on a daily basis? Can we get that closer to where the work is being done? So, you know, that's sort of the...
If you talk to people in this space, everybody's struggling with trying to define value and create value. But the thing they're craving for is like, I don't know where to get out of this backlog. It's a typical thing, right? They're drowning in the backlog, drowning with requests from stakeholders and opinions. You know, everybody has an opinion about what's right and next and critical. And so how do you, in this messy space, actually come up with something, real learning, and how do you make decisions in all of that turmoil? I think there's not enough advice out there or support on actually how to do that in a way that makes sure that value is driving what you're doing. So there's actually a bunch of things we would like to change, you know, or help people succeed better at.
So it's I think it's about increasing your odds that you're running in the right direction. Mm-hmm. Because with this whole Scrum thing, a lot of organizations have become quite good at running very fast, but in something which may or may not be the right direction, and that's what we're sort of trying to achieve. That through good product ownership, we're improving our aim.
Yep, it seems like we've been talking about the 3 V's of product ownership at Scrum.org for many years now: vision, value, validation, and that validation piece has been missing, and we keep talking about it, but like, we needed to do something more. And so I think that's what that new course that you guys have been working on is really going to hit here, is this validation piece. But it's kind of like the analogy of like, if we're going and we're running a race, but we're going to run and we're just going to run really fast, but we might be going in a completely wrong direction. I think that's what a lot of organizations do. And then they don't know how to know if they're doing it. So they just keep going faster and faster. And I think one of the things that has worked really well is just a basic strategy. Maybe we could kind of start there. Is like, if you abstract things up to a problem, what is the business problem we need to solve? All those tasks and things that we want to do, and people have opinions, it's a lot easier to make a decision on like, what is the problem that's most important right now, and what's going to make the biggest impact for the salaries we're going to pay on the Scrum team when they start building things. And so it's not something we do enough. We walk into every backlog Chad and I walk into. It's all tasks. It's all build this, do this, write this API, change this database. It's stuff like that. It's all the things that need to be done. And a product owner is just swimming in like, how do I put these things together to make value? And they don't know how to do the next thing to like actually even have time for validation because they're doing too much project management.
Exactly right. And another analogy with that race is that, you know what, actually they're not making any progress anywhere because they're running around in circles. They're trying to please everything at the same time, which makes there's not enough time to make progress in any direction. So one of the things we want to help people is in this discovery and validation class is to try to map out that space and find focus and have enough data and information to make an informed decision about which need, what want or opportunity, problem, whatever you call it, do you want to address first, and why should we? And are we sure it's the right problem? Do they have this? Is it worth solving? And then, coming up with solutions, etc. So mapping it back to value, whatever you're working on, if you call it a feature, idea, problem, making sure that you can map it back to someone that's going to, get a life improvement with your work. That's something you should really take away from this course.
Yeah. And it's funny because the course is really about product ownership, being responsible for this. And of course, traditionally, it's sort of a UX type thing, UX design type thing that's been sort of boxed into. And now we're really trying to elevate it into product ownership, experimentation, discovery and validation, all these things. But there's more levels to this as well, because so if your product owner is just executing on tasks, you might think that someone else is worried about the outcomes and the impacts of what it is that you're doing, but there's usually no one. So it extends a lot further than that as well. It's and nowadays a lot of the really, really, really successful companies, they have that top to bottom. So everything is an assumption until we get some data, until we validate it, until we can justify the investment in moving forward with this. All of that stuff.
Yeah, I love you brought up the word assumption. It's what's rattling around in my brain still. So, we talk about the 3 V's of product, right? I just was thinking about this a few seconds ago. It feels like a lot of organizations and maybe product spaces, they've got product A, like AAD. It's like they come up with assumptions, not vision. And then they do analysis. And then they get stuck in that loop for a while. Assumptions, analysis, assumptions, analysis, analysis, analysis. And then they go and deliver against all of that. And so they're in this analysis loop based on assumptions. And then they go deliver less frequently. And that's the worst way, right, to find out anything tangible about your product. And with the 3 V's, right, we've introduced the 3 V's in the other product owner courses for years now, right? But what this course does, what this workshop does, is actually then put it to practice so that you're getting practice spending time in a feedback loop, not an analysis loop, which I think that's a huge change for a lot of product teams, product orgs out there.
Yeah, and that's really what the course is about. It's like making it practical. It's labeled as a skills course under the Scrum.org plan. But for me, that's just, hey, how do you make it practical? And that's what we really add as a objective for this. I can actually start doing something, and not just if your environment is suitable for it, but also if it's not suitable for it, there's always something that you could do. We tend to overestimate how much we're boxed in.
Absolutely. And also the thing about, this analysis loop and trying to get out of it. Essentially what you're doing, if you're doing it like you described, Chad, you're taking the most expensive way to get to verified learning. You're spending a lot of time thinking about things, making assumptions, and then you go build it and you hope that it works. So what happens if it doesn't work out? What have you actually learned? Did you know that, is it that the solution isn't working, or is it the assumptions you made that were wrong? So it's really, you likely end up with very poor learning as well. It's really hard to make any conclusions based on what you did or draw any conclusions. So separating that is also one of part of the course that you should try to get into understanding. Hey, how can we test ideas, and how can we test solutions, etc. Right? So that you're not always trying to put everything into one big, super expensive, poorly backed up by investment, essentially.
Yeah. As we've talked to different clients about this course and what we're trying to do here and how to take that next step in your product ownership journey, we've talked to different people, and what we found is that there's people that are scared. There's some fear out there of like leaving. I've worked really hard in my career. I've gotten to this level. I want to make the decisions right now. They've been made for me in the past, and I think I know the right answer. And so they have a hard time saying, wait, you're going to do this differently. You're going to identify problems. We're going to have to pick those things. Then we're going to have to generate solutions and assumptions. And then we're going to test those things. And like, we're going to look at data, and I don't make decisions anymore. And so they get a little bit afraid of this course. And I think what a lot of people don't understand, and that we need to bring them along on, is that the stakeholders are highly involved yet. Like their intuition is going to be super important, but we're going to back that up with data so that we can mitigate the risk that the organization has of going the wrong direction. I don't know. How have you talked about that with people when you've met with leaders and you're just talking to them about this course?
The problem is I have the same problem. And I don't know if you guys can relate, but I always know best.
Yeah, there's actually research on that. If you want to look up Ellen Langer, she has this experiment where you learn that you like your ideas 4 to 5 times better than any other idea. And that's just built in most of our conscious minds. So there's not a lot you can do about it, but you can try to be, as a group, then you can start critiquing each other and just collecting the ideas. But to your point, Jeff, I mean, there's stakeholder management courses out there. I don't like that word. I'm not going to manage anyone around me. If I'm doing product ownership, I'm going to involve and engage. And all of that, expertise and seniority that you typically get with someone higher up it's based on actual experience, right? They have talked to clients, and they know how business usually is done, etc. So you also, of course, you need all of that experience, and that is what you're going to bring to as a perspective on the data that you collect. Like, you want to run this, what's the smallest thing we can do to learn X? And then when you do this, you take the data back and say, hey, this is what we collected. This is the hypothesis we made. Given your experience, do you think we should continue down this path, or should we roll back now? So you're essentially just empowering all of that experiences with more relevant, typically not too expensive data.
Yeah. So you're enabling your stakeholders to make better decisions, basically. That's what it's about. Yeah.
And in small steps, riding the truth curve, right? So you buy yourself enough truth to or validation to make, let's continue this path. Let's continue to invest in this, instead of making big bets with scary moves and poor feedback sometimes.
Yeah. And you know what's really interesting? Recently, what I discovered, because I was interacting with the CXO guy, and we were building something, and I was all for, hey, let's experiment, let's experiment, and then he said, okay, I know enough. Let's do this big investment, and I was mad at him. I was thinking, why do you want to take this leap without the data? But I was engaging with them, and then what I learned through engaging with them is, he has a different perspective on, what is an acceptable investment in this. So there's also levels to this. Sometimes you need to take that big leap, make that big investment, and that depends on your company size. That depends on the type of opportunity that you have, and all that stuff. So it's not just about always running small experiments, and always and at different levels there's a different perspective on what's acceptable risk as well. And that was a really interesting finding for me.
I think it brings it back to vision as well, right? That sure, you can be data, you can collect data, but eventually you might end up being like a minion, just following the data wherever it takes you. And that's not a very strong vision. Let's do what the data tells us, and that's our vision. Like, no, then you might end up, like back when the iPhone was introduced. What was the biggest signal saying? Well, buy a Nokia, or, that's what your phone should look like. Mm-hmm. So no, you also need to take some leaps of faith and have, put the vision into, what do you call it? Create your vision. I mean, not just looking at it, but put it into practice, follow it. So there's data informed, data driven, not so much perhaps.
And then if you're data informed, then you leave some room for I don't know. The question becomes, do we have something unique as human beings? And I think we did.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to something you mentioned, Paul, because it hit me hard. Jeff probably was reflecting too, because he's my business partner, so he knows that I have strong opinions and assumptions, right? My ideas are the best. But that's so that hit me because we're all guilty of it. That we are convicted, like we have conviction over something that we are passionate about, right? We have a great idea and we want to see it through. And so I know the overdone analogy to like working out is for things, but knowing versus doing. Knowing I should be more active and work out more is easier than doing it. Knowing I could be eating a little bit healthier than I am now is one thing. Doing it is the next hardest thing, right? And so I think it's the same in product. We can know all this stuff. And it's probably why this workshop was created, right? We can know all this going to a 2-day product owner training, but doing it, right? You have to practice it. You've got to build that muscle of, we probably should run an experiment here, but man, it'd be so much easier just to go build this quick off of our assumptions. And easier, right? We think it's easier, but it's actually more expensive and it's going to be harder in the long run, more likely. So I don't know, that hit me really hard when you brought that up today.
Yeah, it is. But I don't know. It's as a gym goer myself, I always have big plans on what I aim to achieve. And then and what I like about the gym, it gives you such a good touch point with reality. It's like the iron doesn't lie. And in a sense, that's what you're trying to achieve in a company as well. Remove the ability to stay up in the clouds and in dreamland, something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, we could dive into this too. The same thing with exercise. When you do it with a partner, it becomes easier, right? When you have somebody that's going to hold you accountable, walk through it with you, and do it day to day, it makes it easier, right? You can build off that and get a lot of energy from that. Same thing with a product owner or a Scrum Master. Like if they go through this and they learn this and they work together on it, I think that's a great step for maturity. So we run this company called ScrumMatch. It's a kind of a startup on the side that helps match Scrum Masters and product owners to companies that are serious about Scrum and getting value out of it. And what we found through the data over the last almost year is that 25% of Scrum Masters out there are at team level or not even really helping at all. Or 75% are below. 25% are actually at the product level, system level, org level, and really making big impacts. And so it's very few. If you want to be in that top 25% as a Scrum Master, you should be going with your product owner to this course and help doing this together. That's going to take you to a whole nother level. And so this is the cutting edge. And I think about, I was thinking about this the other day where, when Ken came out with the PSM course, it was very controversial. I mean, there were companies that were afraid. They were scared of this. This was a huge paradigm shift. And I think we're in the same exact spot here in product where we're about to go from just rapid delivery to actually knowing like where are we going in the right direction and having this accelerated feedback loop. And we're not doing that enough.
No, for sure. And you know what the weird thing is about it? My experience so far is that even the most annoying exec will like what you're doing when you start doing this. No.
Yeah, I mean, they'd be right along with you, right? I mean, going through and exercising this, right? Practicing these feedback loops instead of just operating the way it is, the easier way of just let's put those requirements on a piece of paper and then go build it later on, right? You have to practice it and bring everyone along.
Yeah.
It's also a question of how you use your capital, or the skills of your people. Are you really getting the best out of what's possible if you tell them exactly what to do all the time? As leaders, it can be scary, but when you see a person grow, it's so much easier to take a step back and say, okay, I think you got this now. What if we could work with this problem? And I think that shift in leadership is necessary to be able to be competitive long term on this, increasingly global markets we're facing with digital products. It's just we need more brains thinking about the real problem. Are we doing the right thing? Even when we are producing or sitting by our desks producing code or whatever, or we're doing something in the workshop, it has because customers base what they think about our products based on, does it fit me? Does it work for me? I don't care how you created it or how your management looked like or your leadership. It's just a question of how to end up being a good or less good fit with what you need. And the more brains you have thinking about this problem, the much more likely you are to also create high value at low cost.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because I think one of the big things is you can't be exploiting these things that you currently have for as long as it used to. And that's very much sounds like consultant speak. It's like the world is changing more rapidly. But it's true. I firmly believe in that. That's the case. And yeah, of course, and then.
And actually, let's build on that, because we say that often too. The world's changing rapidly, and Jeff, you said the phrase cutting edge. Imagine a listener right now who's actually really mature in the product realm, right? Like really mature. They've been doing this for decades, and they're laughing at us calling this cutting edge. Well, it's not necessarily cutting edge, but the adoption of doing this across many orgs in our industries is very slow. So while the world's moving fast and everything's changing in some places, there's a lot of companies who really need to start moving towards this type of feedback mindset. I mean, there's still companies discovering Scrum for the first time in 2024, like where they're like, "Hey, we're using phase-gate approaches and we're interested in this Scrum thing. Let's check it out," right? But yet some I know who are in more of a bubble. They think everybody is agile. And it's like, no.
Yeah, no. And it's certainly not cutting edge, because I think the entire, every story, mythological story is about going to that agile between chaos and order and bringing back something valuable. That's what it's about.
And I think one of those changes, Chad, that you... if you go back 2 decades or 3 decades, you can see a lot of these practices, but they were performed by a few number of people, like a clique, a small group in a bubble, and then they handed out tasks and they kind of threw things over the wall or fence, whatever you want to call it, for people to go and build. And that has worked for some time, but the really successful companies these days, they deploy this learning and this value maximization at scale. So it's not just a few people that do it. They teach all of their people to do it. And it doesn't slow people down. On the contrary, you get more time back because you're doing the right thing instead of, building it the most expensive way and then figuring it out.
And it's really funny, because these companies are surviving and thriving because we keep talking in the PSPO course, of course, about Kodak and let's say BlackBerry, but nowadays you have like a bunch of really large companies who figured this out. Yeah, they're not going to be stuck in one opportunity to exploit. That's a really interesting phenomenon, I think.
So one thing that we found, we have a client, and I'll try to be generic here, not reveal who it is, but But what they did is their sprint review, they didn't have sprint reviews. And then we started doing this with them. And sprint reviews went from like, I don't know, talking about the button color changing or button position or like the database schema or something, totally abstract that they're like, I don't really care about that. Like, I just want it to work and I want the outcome, to like, we are having an in-depth, real conversation about the vision of where we're going, metrics, where we're going, what we're seeing, how we interpret this, what should we do next? Is this big enough to go to our whole user base? Like, is it not? Are we willing to take that risk? Like, the amount of conversations that we're having with the people doing the work, the product people, and everybody else in the organization that cared, like, didn't happen. It just happened with a subset, and then it was always casted down. People were like, I don't know why they're doing this. And it never met people's expectations. But when you bring everybody to the table and you have real conversations, they understand the intent and they can execute exponentially better.
Yeah, for sure. Imagine if you bring data into that equation from actual usage of the product, and these kinds of things. So make it even more powerful.
Yeah, and it's one of the best ways to avoid this bike shedding. You're familiar with that term?
Explain it. What is
it? You can look it up afterwards, but the idea is they were building this nuclear power plant, and the board spent like, if it was 10 hours or 3 days, something like that, on figuring out what the right way was to color code the bike shed. Like, should it be green, should it be blue, or should we do, should it be this or that? And that's because everybody could have an opinion about the bike shed, but not everybody was comfortable or was competent enough to make decisions on, the nuclear power plant. And so that's the thing that you also might see in sprint reviews. You talk about, should the button be blue or green? It's like, that's not really what our customers are talking about. So if you bring user data back, your sprint reviews can get out of that bike shedding and focus on the real challenges. Like you said, should we roll this out to all of our user base, etc.? Are we ready to go?
So to put it disrespectfully, the best product owners I've seen so far, they had data. So every time a stakeholder said, but this and that, it's like, oh no, but we performed this experiment and the data turns out to say otherwise. It's like it's such a, and of course, slapping people over the head with data is not the best way to go about things, but it's very interesting.
My best takeaway from this podcast is the new prefix I'm going to put in front of all these sentences. To put it disrespectfully.
Yes.
I'm going to overuse that now.
Yeah, well, might be a Dutch thing. I don't know. I don't know about how I don't know how Wisconsin people are known. They're probably pretty direct, also. I think.
I think wouldn't the Dutch way be to not use the prefix, and the only reason you're using the prefix is you have to soften it a little bit for us.
Yeah. I have cultural awareness. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, this is awesome. So this new workshop, right?
Professional Product Discovery and Validation Skills.
Yes, PPDV. So that's launching. Is there anything else you guys want to plug? It doesn't even have to be Scrum.org related, but any other things you're working on that you want to let everybody know about?
Well, it's I don't know. I want to plug a lot of things, but it's not necessarily Scrum.org related. For me, it's very much also Fredrik and me working together related. And it is also Scrum.org related because we work with Scrum.org on this. We've been working on the capabilities and skills of product ownership. So that's like the larger framework that this course fits into. And it's basically, we started off with a question. It's like, okay, what's our idea of what good product ownership looks like? And then from there, we made it really simple. A product owner is able to. And then we started trying to complete that sentence in every way we thought possible would be comprised with that. And based on the answers that we came up with those answers to those questions, we started engaging with other product owners We started engaging with the PSD community, and that sort of led to a framework. And the thing that stood out most to us when we were doing that, the most important bit would be the discovery and validation bit. But there's a lot of other areas that product ownership is about that are really important, I think.
Yeah, but if you're unaware of, or you want to make sure that you cover a broad set of skills that we think are core and necessary, there's this workshop where you grow your product owner capabilities. And I know you, Chad and Jeff, you're also awesome people that can run this workshop for your clients if they want to. But it's a way to try to map your current situation, figure out the challenges you have, and see, hey, what skills and capabilities could address those challenges? And then you create your roadmap and you go back and revisit it, iterate over it continuously. So it's a way to more consciously grow your capabilities and skills as an organization, but as also as individuals. So I think that's really useful if you're kind of stuck or not sure how to take the next step.
Yeah, for sure. And both are available on the Scrum.org website right now. But then I think the even bigger picture that this fits into would be, I think our firm belief currently is that the key to getting more value out of using Scrum is to reorganize all the stuff around it more around product. And that's and I think that's a big part that companies haven't been paying enough attention to, because you're doing Scrum at the team level, and above that you still have all these steering committees, all these fixed price projects, all this bullshit. So for Scrum to really take it to the next level, because things get better with Scrum. Pretty soon things get better, but it sort of hits a ceiling, and then to break through that ceiling, I think the key is to reorganize everything around it, more around product.
Or you do an inauthenticity gap mapping, where you discover where you're not authentic and stuff. So that's one way to discover your next step as an organization as well.
Sure. So maybe in the future, there'll be something beyond practices and skills, and maybe there'll be something a bit more structural focused at the org level. So,
yeah,
cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for the conversation today. I think we covered a lot in a short amount of time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
If you found value in today's episode, share this with a friend. Until next time, get agile and stay agile.